The avoidant person who ignored you, who dismissed your needs, who created distance when you needed presence, who made you feel invisible or unimportant or like your feelings didn't matter, needs to learn that there is a real and lasting price for treating someone this way. And teaching them this price is not optional vindictiveness or petty revenge, but is essential boundary setting that serves both your healing and their potential growth. When the avoidant ignores you without consequence, when they can withdraw and return at will, when they face no real cost for their patterns of dismissal and emotional unavailability, they learn nothing. They continue believing their behavior is acceptable or at least tolerable, that people will accept whatever minimal effort they're willing to provide, that ignoring someone's needs and feelings is a strategy without consequences. This lack of consequence reinforces their patterns, enables their dysfunction, and ensures they'll repeat the same behaviors in future relationships. But more importantly for you, allowing the ignoring to happen without establishing a clear price means you're teaching yourself that you don't matter enough to defend, that your needs are optional, that being treated poorly is acceptable as long as the person eventually comes back or offers minimal acknowledgement. This damages your self-worth and sets a precedent for accepting insufficient treatment in future relationships. Teaching the avoidant the price of ignoring you is fundamentally about establishing that you have standards, that mistreatment has consequences, that you value yourself enough to enforce boundaries that protect you from people who cannot or will not treat you with basic respect and consideration. The price must be real, must be enforced consistently, and must be substantial enough that the avoidant cannot dismiss it or minimize it. The price is not your anger, though anger is a valid response to being ignored. The price is not your hurt, though hurt is a natural consequence of their behavior. The price is not your words telling them how much they damaged you, though naming the harm is sometimes necessary. The real price, the price that teaches a lasting lesson and that protects your well-being, is the permanent or at least long-term loss of access to you, loss of the relationship or connection they took for granted, loss of your availability and your willingness to accept their patterns, loss of the specific gifts you brought to their life that they cannot easily find elsewhere. This price must be enforced through your actions rather than through your words, through consequences they experience rather than through lectures they can dismiss, through permanent changes in your availability and your boundaries, rather than through temporary upset that fades when they offer minimal effort to restore connection. Why? Teaching them the price is essential for your healing and their growth. Teaching the avoidant person the price of ignoring you is not an optional exercise in making them suffer or punishing them for their patterns, but is an essential component of your own healing and is a potentially valuable lesson for their growth, though their growth is a secondary concern to your well-being. Understanding why establishing this price is necessary reveals both the stakes for your own healing and the potential impact on their future patterns. Teaching them the price is essential for your healing because it restores your sense of agency and power in a situation where their ignoring made you feel powerless and unimportant. When someone ignores you, when they dismiss your needs and your feelings, when they make you feel invisible, you experience powerlessness. You cannot make them pay attention. You cannot force them to care. You cannot control their behavior or their choices. This powerlessness damages your sense of self and creates a feeling of being at the mercy of someone else's whims and patterns. But when you establish and enforce a clear price for their behavior, when you make yourself unavailable, when you remove access, when you demonstrate through your actions that mistreatment has real consequences, you reclaim your power. You cannot control their behavior, but you can control your responses and your boundaries. You cannot make them treat you well, but you can ensure that treating you poorly results in losing access to you. This restoration of agency and power is healing because it proves to yourself that you're not helpless, that you have options, that you can protect yourself even when you cannot change them. Teaching them the price is essential for your healing because it validates your worth and communicates to yourself that you matter enough to defend and protect. When you allow someone to ignore you without consequence, when you accept their return after they've dismissed you, when you let them maintain access, Despite their patterns, you send a message to yourself that you're not worth protecting, that your needs don't matter enough to enforce, that being treated poorly is acceptable as long as connection is maintained. This message is deeply damaging to your self-worth and self-esteem. But when you establish a clear price, when you enforce boundaries that protect you, when you demonstrate through your actions that you deserve better treatment, you send a different message to yourself. You matter, your needs are important, you're worth protecting, you deserve to be treated with respect and consideration. This message is healing and is foundational to rebuilding self-worth that may have been damaged by the relationship and by their patterns of ignoring you. Teaching them the price is essential for your healing because it prevents you from remaining stuck in a cycle of hoping they'll change while accepting behavior that hurts you. Without clear consequences, without an enforced price, you remain in painful limbo where you're hoping the avoidant will recognize your worth and will change their patterns while simultaneously accepting their continued ignoring and dismissal. This limbo is excruciating and prevents healing because you cannot move forward while still hoping for change that isn't happening. But when you establish a clear price, when you make yourself unavailable, when you demonstrate that their patterns have ended their access to you, you exit the limbo. You're no longer waiting for them to change. You're no longer accepting unacceptable behavior. You've made a clear choice that prioritizes your well-being over hope for their transformation. This clarity allows healing to proceed because you're no longer stuck between hope and reality. Teaching them the price is essential for your healing because it creates a clean break and a firm boundary that allows your nervous system to regulate and your attachment to disengage. Continuing contact with someone who ignores you, maintaining availability to someone who dismisses your needs, keeps your nervous system activated and your attachment system engaged in ways that prevent healing. Your system remains in a state of hoping, waiting, being affected by their presence or absence, reacting to their minimal efforts or their continued ignoring. But when you establish a price that includes removing yourself completely, maintaining no contact, making yourself genuinely unavailable, your nervous system can begin to calm. Your attachment system can begin to disengage. You create the space and separation necessary for your biology and your psychology to recognize you're safe. You've survived. You can move forward without them. Teaching them the price is potentially valuable for their growth, though this is a secondary benefit rather than the primary purpose. When the avoidant faces real and lasting consequences for their patterns, when they lose something genuinely valuable through their behavior, when they experience an unavoidable price that cannot be minimized or managed through their usual defensive strategies, it creates the possibility for genuine recognition and learning. They might recognize that their patterns are not just personally limiting, but actively destroy relationships and connections they value. They might recognize that people have limits and that exceeding those limits results in permanent loss. They might be motivated to seek therapy or to do genuine work on their attachment wounds. This growth is possible, but is not guaranteed and should not be your responsibility or your concern. If the price you establish motivates them to change, that benefits their future relationships and their own well-being. But whether they learn and grow is their choice and their responsibility, not yours. Teaching them the price is essential because it breaks the pattern of enabling that allows their dysfunction to continue without sufficient motivation to change. When you accept being ignored without enforcing consequences, when you remain available despite mistreatment, when you take them back when they offer minimal effort after a period of dismissal, you enable their patterns. You teach them that ignoring works, that they can treat you this way without losing you, that minimal effort is sufficient to maintain access to you. This enabling allows their patterns to continue and actually prevents growth because there's no motivation to change when current patterns work for them. But when you establish a real price, when you remove the enabling by making yourself unavailable, you remove one factor that allowed the patterns to persist. You cannot make them change, but you can stop participating in a dynamic that requires no change from them. Teaching them the price is essential because it sets a precedent for how you allow yourself to be treated in all relationships going forward. The standards you set with the avoidant, the boundaries you enforce or fail to enforce, teach you patterns that will affect your future relationships. If you allow being ignored without consequence, you teach yourself that this is acceptable, that you're willing to tolerate this treatment, that your needs don't matter enough to defend. These lessons make you vulnerable to choosing similar partners in the future and to accepting similar treatment. But if you establish a clear price with the avoidant, if you demonstrate that mistreatment ends relationships or access, you teach yourself a different lesson. You have standards, you enforce boundaries, you value yourself enough to leave situations that don't serve you. This lesson protects you in future relationships and helps ensure you don't repeat the pattern of accepting insufficient treatment. The specific consequences that make the price undeniable. Teaching the avoidant the price of ignoring you requires implementing specific consequences that are substantial enough to be undeniable, that create a real loss they cannot minimize or dismiss, and that demonstrate through your actions rather than your words that mistreatment has costs they cannot avoid or undo. Understanding what consequences effectively teach the price reveals what you must do to establish boundaries that serve your healing while creating an impact that might motivate their eventual growth. The first and most essential consequence is complete removal of your presence from their life through absolute no contact that you maintain regardless of their attempts to restore connection. You block them on all platforms. You don't respond to messages, calls, emails. You avoid places you know they'll be if possible. You remove every avenue they have to access you or to communicate with you. This complete removal creates an undeniable price because it means they've lost access to you entirely. They cannot reach you even if they want to. They cannot get small doses of contact that would ease their discomfort about the loss. The totality of your absence is what makes the price real. There's no partial connection to soften the blow, no breadcrumbs to maintain hope, no way for them to minimize the loss by telling themselves they could get you back if they wanted because you're still somewhat accessible. The second essential consequence is your visible thriving and happiness that they observe from a distance, proving that you're better off without them and that they're ignoring freed rather than harmed you. You focus on yourself, your healing, your goals, your growth. You build a life that's full and satisfying. You pursue what makes you happy, and you live this life visibly enough. Through social media, if that's natural for you, through mutual social circles, through being seen in public spaces, looking happy and thriving, that evidence of your well-being reaches them even through the distance you've created. This visible thriving creates a price because it proves they didn't break you. They're not necessary for your happiness. You're actually better without them than you were with them. It destroys any comforting narrative they might construct about you suffering in their absence or needing them or being diminished by their ignoring. The evidence that you're thriving forces them to confront that they lost someone who is valuable and who is clearly capable of being happy without them. The third essential consequence is your emotional unavailability. Even if circumstances force physical proximity, treat them with polite indifference that communicates they no longer matter to you emotionally. If you must be in the same space, shared workplace, mutual friends events, unavoidable social situations, you treat them with courtesy but complete emotional distance. You're polite but not warm. You acknowledge them but don't engage in meaningful conversation. You're neither angry nor hurt in visible ways. You're simply indifferent, treating them like an acquaintance you barely know, rather than like someone who once mattered to you. This indifference creates a price because it proves you've moved on emotionally. You're not carrying a torch for them. You're not still affected by them in ways they could use to feel important or to maintain psychological connection. Your indifference is more devastating than your anger would be because anger proves you still care enough to feel strongly, while indifference proves you don't care anymore. The fourth essential consequence is your refusal to provide closure, explanation, or opportunity for them to apologize or to make amends, denying them the relief or resolution they might seek. When they attempt to reach out, when they express a desire to talk or to explain or to apologize, you don't engage. You don't provide them with a conversation where they can ease their guilt or feel resolved about what happened. You don't give them the opportunity to apologize and be forgiven in ways that would make them feel better. You leave them sitting with their discomfort, with their regret, with their lack of resolution. This denial of closure creates a price because it means they cannot easily process and move past what happened. They're stuck with their guilt, their regret, their questions about what you think or feel. The lack of resolution keeps the loss active and prevents them from achieving psychological comfort about having lost you. The fifth essential consequence is your demonstration of raised standards through how you talk about relationships and through who you choose to date if you date, making clear you won't accept the treatment they provided. In conversations with mutual friends, if asked about relationships, you might express that you've learned you deserve consistency, respect, someone who makes you a priority. If you date someone new, the contrast between how this person treats you and how the avoidant treated you becomes visible to anyone observing. You're with someone who shows up, who is consistent, who makes you feel valued. This demonstration of raised standards creates a price because it proves to the avoidant that they don't meet your standards anymore, that you've leveled up in ways that leave them behind, that they've lost access not just to you as you were, but to any future possibility because you now require things they haven't demonstrated the capacity to provide. The sixth essential consequence is the loss of the specific things you provided to their life that they took for granted and that they cannot easily find or replace elsewhere. You provided understanding, acceptance, patience with their patterns, emotional support, even when they couldn't reciprocate, care, and attention that boosted their ego and their sense of being valued. When you remove yourself completely, they lose all of this. They lose the understanding. New people don't see them as clearly, don't accept their patterns as readily. They lose the patience. New people give up on their patterns more quickly. They lose the specific boost to their ego that your care provided. As they attempt to connect with others and find that others don't provide what you provided, the price of having ignored you and lost you becomes undeniable. They recognize they lost something rare and valuable that they cannot simply replace. The seventh essential consequence is the permanent change in how mutual friends and social circles view them and view what happened, creating a social cost to their behavior that affects their reputation and their standing. When you maintain your dignity, when you don't badmouth them, but also don't minimize what happened, when you move forward visibly while they remain stuck or struggling, people draw their own conclusions. People recognize you were the one who was treated poorly and you're the one who is thriving. People see that you've moved on while the avoidant seems affected and regretful. This shift in social perception creates a price because it affects their standing in communities that matter to them, affects how others view them, creates a social consequence that goes beyond just losing you to include a broader impact on their reputation and their relationships with others. How to enforce the price without compromising your dignity. Establishing the price that teaches the avoidant about the consequences of ignoring you must be done in ways that protect your dignity and your self-respect, that demonstrate strength rather than pettiness, that serve your healing rather than serving a desire for revenge. Understanding how to enforce the price with dignity ensures you're acting from a place of self-respect and healthy boundary setting rather than from a place of hurt attempting to hurt back. Enforcing the price with dignity means implementing consequences through your actions and your boundaries rather than through angry confrontations or attempts to make them feel bad through your words. You don't need to tell them you're making them pay a price for ignoring you. You don't need to explain all the ways they hurt you or to detail their failures. You don't need to express anger or to attack their character. You simply act. You remove yourself from their life. You block their access. You move forward with your life. You maintain boundaries when they attempt to breach them. Your actions speak far more powerfully than words would, and acting without dramatic verbal confrontation protects your dignity by demonstrating you're strong enough to enforce boundaries without needing to justify them or to make a big show of your hurt and anger. Enforcing the price with dignity means maintaining composure and control of your emotions in any interactions that do occur, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing you broken or desperate. If circumstances force interaction, if you must respond to a practical matter, if you encounter them in shared space, you maintain a calm, controlled demeanor. You're not visibly upset. You're not crying or yelling. You're not showing them that they still have power to affect your emotional state. You're composed, dignified, polite, but distant. This composure protects your dignity by ensuring you don't create memories you'll later be ashamed of, by ensuring they cannot point to your emotional reactions as evidence of instability or as justification for their patterns, by ensuring you maintain the upper hand through your obvious control and strength. Enforcing the price with dignity means focusing your energy on building your life rather than on monitoring their reaction or on attempting to make them see what they lost. Your focus is on yourself, your healing, your growth, your happiness, your goals, your future. You're not checking their social media to see if they seem upset. You're not asking mutual friends how they're handling the loss. You're not crafting your own social media posts to make them jealous. You're genuinely living your life for yourself. And if evidence of that life reaches them and affects them, that's incidental rather than the goal. This genuine forward focus protects your dignity by ensuring your life is actually good rather than being a performance, by ensuring you're not still organized around them and their reactions, by ensuring your thriving is authentic rather than strategic. Enforcing the price with dignity means refusing to engage with their attempts to minimize what happened or to restore connection on their terms, maintaining firm boundaries without lengthy explanations. When they reach out, you don't engage in debate about whether you're being too harsh or whether you should give them another chance. You don't justify your boundaries. You don't explain your decision repeatedly. You simply maintain the boundary. I'm not interested in reconnecting. I need to focus on moving forward. I wish you well, but I'm not available for contact. Brief, clear, final. This refusal to engage in lengthy discussion protects your dignity by demonstrating you don't need their agreement or their understanding to enforce your boundaries, by showing you're confident enough in your decision that you don't need to defend it. Enforcing the price with dignity means not bad-mouthing them to mutual friends or using social circles to punish them, but also not minimizing what happened or protecting their reputation at the expense of your truth. You don't go on a campaign to make them look bad. You don't detail all their failures to everyone who will listen. You don't try to turn people against them, but you also don't lie to protect them. If asked what happened, you're honest, but brief. The relationship wasn't healthy for me, and I decided to move on. We had incompatible patterns, and I needed to prioritize my well-being. You state facts without drama, without extensive blame, but also without minimizing the reality of what happened. This balanced approach protects your dignity by ensuring you're not engaging in gossip or character assassination, while also ensuring you're not protecting someone who hurt you at the expense of your own truth. Enforcing the price with dignity means being consistent in maintaining your boundaries regardless of their emotional appeals or their promises to change, demonstrating that your word and your boundaries mean something. When they cry or express regret, when they promise they've changed or they'll do better, when they make appeals designed to trigger your empathy or your hope, you maintain your boundary. You recognize these appeals for what they are. Attempts to get you to lower your standards and accept them back without genuine demonstrated change, and you refuse. This consistency protects your dignity by proving you're a person of your word, by demonstrating that your boundaries aren't negotiable based on emotional manipulation, by showing that you value yourself enough to hold firm even when it would be easier to give in. Enforcing the price with dignity means ultimately letting go of attachment to whether they learn from the consequences or whether the price affects them in ways you hope it will. You establish the price and enforce the consequences for yourself, for your healing, for your boundaries. Whether they learn anything, whether they feel an appropriate amount of regret, whether they change for their future relationships, All of this is outside your control and is not your concern. You release attachment to their growth or their suffering and focus simply on protecting yourself and moving forward with your life. This release protects your dignity by ensuring you're not still emotionally entangled with them through hoping they'll learn or through needing them to suffer, by ensuring your healing is about you and not about them. What happens when the price becomes clear to them? When the avoidant person fully recognizes the price they're paying for having ignored you? When the consequences become undeniable and they're forced to sit with the full weight of what their behavior cost them? Specific recognitions and reactions occur that represent their confrontation with a reality they couldn't avoid through their usual defensive strategies. Understanding what happens when the price becomes clear reveals both the impact of your boundaries and the likely trajectory of their response. When the price becomes clear, the avoidant experiences initial shock and disbelief that you're actually gone, that the loss is real and apparently permanent, that they cannot simply undo what happened through minimal effort or belated recognition. They expected you to be available, to accept their return if they decided they wanted to come back, to be willing to work things out if they offered even minimal acknowledgement of their patterns. The reality that you're completely unavailable, that you've moved on, that you're not interested in reconnecting creates shock because it contradicts their assumptions. They didn't believe you would actually leave permanently. They didn't think the consequences would be this severe or this lasting. The shock is their first confrontation with the reality that their behavior had costs they cannot simply manage or minimize. When the price becomes clear, the avoidant experiences waves of regret about specific moments when they ignored you or dismissed your needs, moments that now stand out as opportunities to choose differently that they cannot reclaim. They remember times you reached for connection and they pulled away. They remember your expressions of hurt or need that they dismissed or minimized. They remember opportunities to show up for you that they declined in favor of their comfort or their defended distance. These memories become painful because they recognize these were choice points where different choices would have led to a different outcome, where being present instead of ignoring could have prevented the loss they're now experiencing. The regret is sharp because it's focused on specific concrete moments that they can replay but cannot change.